fantastic. So I wanted to welcome everybody to the first session of this exciting 4-part series that is being co-produced and co-presented by the Canadian Women's Chamber of Commerce and the Women's Entrepreneurship Knowledge Hub. It is for service providers primarily, and it is happening today and over the next 2 Mondays rather, and then we're going to wrap up with an exciting panel discussion on December 9th. So I welcome everybody to the first session. If I can figure out how to, oh, there we go. The first session today, which is called How to Answer Questions About Registering with the CRA and Taxes. And so just a quick run through of the agenda, so everyone has a sense of what's going to happen today. Some welcome and introductions from me, Nancy Wilson. We will then go through opening comments from Wendy Sukier from the Women's Entrepreneurship Knowledge Hub. Then we'll move on to the content about how to answer questions, registering with the CRA and taxes, with our 2 presenters from the CRA. And then Q&A with our presenters from the CRA as well. So before we get started, I do want to welcome everybody, and I also want to begin by acknowledging the Indigenous people and all of the lands that we are on today, because this is a virtual meeting. And we're meeting on a virtual platform. I want to take a moment to acknowledge the importance of all the lands, which we call home, and reaffirm our commitment and responsibility to improve the relationships between nations, and to pursue an understanding of local Indigenous people and their cultures. From coast to coast, we acknowledge the ancestral and unceded territory of all the Inuit, Métis, and First Nation people that call this land home. So welcome to everybody to, I'm a little bit nervous, obviously. There's so many people here, but I'm very excited as well. I do want to introduce myself. My name is Nancy Wilson. I am the founder and CEO of the Canadian Women's Chamber of Commerce. We call it CanWCC because Canadian Women's Chamber of Commerce is a bit of a mouthful, although I can say it pretty quickly because I say it all day long. So at CanWCC, we are the only chamber of commerce in Canada that represents and advocates for women identified and non-binary entrepreneurs, founders, and business owners in Canada. So we are primarily an advocacy agency. We do provide our members with tools and resources, and we are proud to be a partner with the Women's Entrepreneurship Knowledge Hub, a partner organization with the Women's Entrepreneurship Knowledge Hub, and in working with them as part of the larger ecosystem in working to promote women's entrepreneurship across Canada. The Women's Entrepreneurship Knowledge Hub is led by Dr. Wendy Sukier. I can hear her last name perfectly in my head, and every time I try to make the sounds with my mouth, I say it just a little bit incorrectly, but it's Wendy Sukier, I believe. She will correct me if I'm wrong. I will call her Wendy. I know her quite well. Wendy is one of Canada's leading experts in disruptive technologies, innovation processes, and diversity. She is a prolific researcher and has written over 200 papers on technology, innovation, and management, and is the co-author of the bestseller Innovation Nation: Canadian Leadership from Java to Jurassic Park. She's also the founder and leader of Ryerson University's Diversity Institute, and she is the director of the Women's Entrepreneurship Knowledge Hub. So I'm going to turn things over to Wendy to give us some opening remarks and set the context for this Financial Literacy 101 series. Wendy.
Thanks so much, Nancy. I wonder if I can have access to the screen sharing function?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. And it would be super good if I could find the right presentation to share. Just give me one moment to see what happened to it. Okay, so there it is. While I'm fumbling around with the technology, I just wanted to say it's really a pleasure to be here, and I'm very grateful to Nancy and Shannon on my team who helped put this together. I also wanted to take this opportunity to say something I never thought I would say, which is thank you very much, Canada Revenue Agency, for all that you have done during COVID to help Canadians, because as I said, I think the government responded quite remarkably in terms of pivoting and adapting and moving money out. And nothing's ever perfect, but I never thought that I would be in a position to say thank you. You really, I think, delivered for Canadians. So just taking advantage of my time on the stage to say that. And what I wanted to do is not take a ton of time, because you've got much more important things to talk about. And I think many of you already know plenty about the Women Entrepreneurship Knowledge Hub, but I just wanted to set a little context so people understand why we're doing this. The Women Entrepreneurship Knowledge Hub was really set up to help support Canada's women entrepreneurship strategy by providing infrastructure to link together organizations that support women entrepreneurs, not just women's organizations like the Canadian Women Chamber of Commerce, but also mainstream financial institutions, funding agencies, and so on. Because our view is that while the Women Entrepreneurship Strategy funding, which is $5 billion, is really potentially transformational, there's lots of other money in lots of other pockets that we also want to make sure that women entrepreneurs have access to. And so what we're really doing is trying to link together organizations and to use research and evidence to drive inclusion and to share best practices. The Diversity Institute also, I was the Vice President of Research and Innovation, so I've been in the space for quite a long time, setting up incubators and running entrepreneurial programs on the ground. And we currently run 7 incubators across the country, particularly targeting marginalized women, immigrants, Black women, and others. So we sort of sit in between traditional research and practice and try to bridge the two things together. So where did this come from? The insights that we gained over the last couple of years doing research were really important in framing the programs that we sponsor and the programs that we develop. And there are a couple of things that I think were really important. One, when you look at women entrepreneurs as majority owners of small, medium enterprises, which is often the dominant definition, what you find is about 16% of majority owners of SMEs are women. It's about 114,000. But when you define entrepreneur as self-employed woman, you find that 38% of self-employed Canadians are women, and it's almost 1 million. One of the things that we know is that many SMEs begin as side gigs or self-employed activities. And so one of the things we're really interested in is how we build that funnel from self-employment to SME. And Shannon's also been leading some work around encouraging self-employed women to think about incorporation, for example, as part of the pathway to success, because we know that if you're incorporated, you have access to more resources and frankly, you minimize the risk. One of the other observations that we made is that a lot of women take pride in the fact that they're bootstrapped or self-financed. And while it is commendable in some senses, it's not necessarily the best business strategy. Far better to build your business with other people's money. And we do think that one of the issues that is constraining many women entrepreneurs is financial literacy and is an understanding of the full range of options that are available. And while many of the organizations supporting women entrepreneurs specifically or supporting entrepreneurs generally have massive programs to advance financial literacy, get access to funding, and so on, what we find is a lot of that information is fragmented. So some of the startup incubators may know where you can go for seed funding, but once they've dealt with their sort of set of processes and the cohorts that they're used to dealing with, they don't actually necessarily know where to send people next. And so one of the things that Shannon's been doing as our senior financial and business advisor at WEKH after her many years in financial services is to try to map all the different sources of funding, how the pieces fit together so that women serving organizations, regardless of whether they're early stage, late stage, or somewhere in between, understand and can help people navigate whatever door they come in. So we find with government agencies, for example, if you come in the wrong door, you're too early stage for NRC or FedDev. Often, you know, if you get a good advisor, they will send you somewhere else. But equally often, they will simply say, you're not the kind of business that we are focused on funding. So we're trying to knit together and complement the services that currently exist rather than reinventing the wheel. The other thing that's important here is that women account for a higher percentage of micro firms and are less likely to have employees. Why do we care about that? Because when government programs are designed to support SMEs with employees, often women-led businesses, Indigenous businesses, and many other businesses get left behind. So big focus of our work is research. And some of that research is just pulling together work that's been done by other people. So this is the small business, the SME survey that's done by the Canadian government that really reinforces the fact that women are less likely to get credit from financial institutions, partly because they don't apply, not just that some of them may face barriers, partly because they're often in sectors that are not part of the traditional domain of the institutions that they're approaching. But where the big gaps are is when it comes to things like financing from angel investors and VCs, where we see that men are 4 times as likely to get funding from those sources. So we know that there are differences in terms of access to financing for women. Some of it is because of systemic barriers and discrimination. Some of it is because of the structural differences between women-led businesses and others. And so there's lots of research that shows, for example, if a man and a woman have identical pitches and go to a VC, man is going to get asked different questions. VCs are going to invest in potential rather than track record, and more likely they will put their money behind the men. And sadly, this doesn't necessarily change if you have women VCs, because often they simply replicate the same kinds of behavior. The other thing we know is that women, like other groups, are often discouraged borrowers. So based on a range of experiences, they may not even try to get funding. And then there are lots of other barriers that have been well considered. And we think this is one of the most important, which is the stereotypes that are really pervasive, that equate entrepreneur, not just with men, not just with white men, but with white men from Silicon Valley. So typically, if you ask people to name 3 entrepreneurs, they're going to say, you know, Mark Zuckerberg, Steve Jobs, and Elon Musk, or some combination thereof. They're not going to say Oprah Winfrey. They're not going to say Kylie Jenner, who's a billionaire using Shopify, a Canadian product. And they're not going to say Celine Dion, even though her company's worth $800 million and one of the largest women-led businesses in the country. And so we have to really crack those stereotypes. We also have to understand that because of the structural differences I mentioned with respect to women-led businesses, the companies are newer, they're smaller, they're less well-financed, they're more likely to be in services. COVID has hit them really, really hard, because those are exactly the businesses that are most threatened by COVID. And you add to that the burden of unpaid work, particularly childcare, elder care, just general household duties. And we find that women are really being crushed right now at much higher rate than we hear for men. They're losing their jobs. 30% are considering not returning to the workplace, and so on. And we know that, the data really reinforces that there are huge differences in terms of the impacts of COVID in terms of revenue, as well as other dimensions when we look at women versus men. As I said, we also know that the sectors most affected by COVID tend to be sectors where women entrepreneurs are most prominent. Accommodation and food services, retail, not likely in manufacturing or construction, but healthcare and social assistance as well. And tech, which is one of the sectors that is doing pretty well, of course, is a sector where women are underrepresented. We did some work with the Bank of Montreal and found that they're looking at the response of about 1,000 women entrepreneurs. There were a number of themes about the pandemic that won't surprise you: crushing impact on mental and physical health, concerns about bankruptcy and revenue loss, concerns about workplace safety, concerns about transitioning to online, concerns about their employees, and so on, but also innovative approaches. There were some companies that, for example, were supplying six distributors prior to COVID, and now we're in 60, because as soon as they went digital, they had access to much bigger markets. We also have to really reinforce intersectionality and its impact on all of these things. So when you combine being a woman with, for example, being Black, what you see are multiple barriers adding up. And the same is true for Indigenous women, racialized women, immigrant women, women with disabilities, and so on. And this is just a survey the Black Business Professional Association did, comparing the results of a survey by the Canadian Federation of Independent Business with their membership, men and women. And you can see, twice as many don't think that the wage subsidy will help. 4 times as many don't think they'll qualify for CEBA. Twice as many don't have enough money to pay their bills, and so on and so forth. There's really quite a stark difference between Black businesses and others. Again, some of this is structural. Some of this has to do with the sectors they're more likely to be in, the fact that they tend to be underfinanced, the fact they tend to be smaller, and so on. And of course, we also have seen similar issues for rural women, because as we've shifted to online, broadband access becomes a big issue, and 50% of Indigenous women are in remote and rural communities. So again, we see these multiplied effects. Given that I have a friendly audience, I also wanted to point out that while women are very prominent when it comes to the discussions of healthcare, we see, and the medical response to COVID, we see Dr. Tam on television every night. Most of the medical officers of health are women. When it comes to the discussions about the recovery and innovation and growth, often women are not at the table. So today, I'm not going to go through this because it's this is Shannon's area, but really one of the things that has come out of her work is a bit of mapping around what are the sources of information at different stages, what are the services that are available at different stages of women's entrepreneurial journeys. What kinds of funding are appropriate at, pre-startup, early startup, growth, and so on? What are the terms? What are the conditions? How do we find the money? How do we hand off from one source to another? How do we decide about whether or not self-financing makes sense, especially if we're running up our credit cards at usurious interest rates, versus establishing more standard approaches? And again, trying to untangle where you go for what money, critically important. And one of the things that has come out of the work is that in some ways, there are a number of different sources you can go to if you want $50,000 or $100,000, fewer sources if you need $5,000. And yet we know the majority of businesses in Canada start with an initial investment of about $5,000. So one of the things we're really preoccupied with, as I said previously, is taking an ecosystem approach and thinking not just about financing, although that's critically important, thinking not just about how to get more access and how to erode barriers in financial institutions, but also to look at what's going on in incubators, what's going on in training programs, what's going on with business support generally. Also looking overall at values and culture and stereotypes and policies. Why is it that, and Nancy, you'll correct me if I'm wrong, and apologies to the CRA people if this is no longer true, but it used to be, I'm old enough I can say this, it used to be that a golf club membership was an allowable business expense, but childcare wasn't. That may still be the case. So we have to start to challenge some of our assumptions about what is and what isn't part of our essential infrastructure. We have to apply a gender and diversity lens to policies and practices. And we have to think about how our entire system is really geared towards serving an image of entrepreneur, which may apply to white men in tech who aspire to work in Silicon Valley North, but excludes lots of other people. And so one of the things we're doing is we've just launched our See It, Be It campaign, where we're trying to highlight and champion award-winning women entrepreneurs across sectors and across Canada. We're continuing to apply a gender and diversity lens to major systems. We're looking at the superclusters, we're looking at FedDev, we're looking at many infrastructure Canada and so on, and trying to get them to really challenge their assumptions about what they're doing, what innovation is, and who they should be supporting. We're pushing really hard to embed gender and diversity in procurement policies and funding right across the board. We're tailoring programming and sponsorships to meeting the needs of diverse populations. And we recently received our Indigenous name at a ceremony. We are Ice Bear Woman. We're also pushing on the skills agenda. The skills agenda is one of the most important things that came out in the speech from the throne, but SMEs and entrepreneurs are often not considered in that agenda, even though they account for most jobs and employment in Canada. And one of my favorites is we've launched a free tutoring program for marginalized families, because we know that one of the biggest challenges is dealing with childcare. And for immigrant and racialized women, this is often compounded with other dimensions of exclusion. The Ask Give platform we developed with SheEO and the Forum for Women Entrepreneurs allows people to go on, ask for what they need and offer what they can give. And we are delighted to be here today. We're happy to listen to what is required that will help move us all forward. And we welcome your input. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Wendy. I really appreciate it. That was a great overview. I was taking notes myself. WEKH is always doing new and exciting things. Anyone who is interested in learning more about WEKH, I really encourage you to visit the website. Shannon, Megan, I'm sure one of you can put it into the chat box. There's so many resources and links and great information on the website, as well as a ton of research that's really accessible and interesting to read. Thanks, Shannon. So I'm going to move on now and introduce Indy McLean. Indy is, she works at the Canadian or Canada Revenue Agency. And she is a liaison officer with their liaison officer service. So the Liaison Officer Service is a free educational tax program for small businesses. The purpose of the program is to encourage tax compliance by helping business owners understand their tax obligations. And it's a free service, and they actually, well, they used to come out in person and do workshops and informational seminars. Now a lot, those are being done virtually like everything else is, but it's really, really a great opportunity for business owners as well as service organizations to help people understand exactly what their obligations are and how the CRA programs work. So just before I turn it over to Indy, I want to mention that following Indy's presentation, there's going to be a Q&A portion. So submit your questions. We're not going to take questions during the presentation, but we will take questions and answer questions. And Jade, who is here, also a liaison officer, is going to help with the questions following the presentation. But make sure to enter your questions in the Q&A box, because that's the box that Jade is going to be taking the questions from. Okay, Indy, welcome. Thank you so much. I will turn it over to you.
Thanks so much, Nancy. Thank you everyone for joining us today. We're happy to be here and we really want to share the education. I'm going to start the presentation and share our screen. Let's see. There we go. Everyone see the Liaison Officer Service screen? Awesome. Okay. As mentioned, my name is Indy McLean. My colleague Jade Wong and I will be spending some time with you today, and we'll certainly try to answer any questions you have. When you're putting questions into the chat box, if you can keep them a little more general in nature, we are going to encourage you to go online and request a session. We do meet one-to-one, and as Nancy mentioned, it's going to be either by telephone or virtual. We haven't gotten permission yet to start the one-on-one virtual meetings, but certainly we can pick up the phone and give you a call. The way that it works, when you go online, Canada.ca site, and you request a liaison officer visit, that goes straight to Ottawa, and then they disseminate them out to the offices that you would be assigned to based on your postal code, in essence. Okay, so you're welcome wherever you are to go ahead and make that request, and someone will get back to you as soon as, I know that as soon as I get the requests, I try and call them within an hour or two, depending on what time of day it is. But certainly, our job is really to reach out and to help guide you and show you what direction you need to go in. And we have established business phone numbers for business inquiries. They are the guys that handle your account specific questions. We also have personal taxation. They handle the specific questions. There are all sorts of phone lines available, but sometimes we recognize that you may not have the words or know what to ask in order to get to that destination that you're looking for. So that's part of our role as well, is to just be here to help get you to where you need to go. Okay. So the contents of the seminar, basically, these documents that we're reviewing, of course, they're approved by our headquarters, not allowed to really change them. So I'm going to speak to the slides, and the concepts that we're bringing to you today are not meant to replace any of the laws or regulations or what's contained in the Income Tax Act or Excise Tax Act, which are two of our tax laws in Canada. Copyrights and documents, of course, remain the property of Canada Revenue Agency, and you will have access if you want to. I don't know if Nancy's going to be sending out the information from this presentation to everyone. Yes, okay. And certainly, again, I recommend that you put through the web request and speak to us if you've got specific questions. Okay. We're not here to replace your bookkeepers or accounts, but more just to provide general information. So a little bit of background about our service. It was started as a pilot project back in 2014. And due to the popularity of just going out and speaking to small business owners, it became a permanent program in 2015. And since May of 2019, the Liaison Officer Service has expanded to offer the service to small incorporated business owners. And what we find is you often have that sole proprietor who decides, I'm going to incorporate, and they don't know what they're jumping into when they incorporate. So we give you the basics of here's what's expected to you from the tax perspective. We're going to provide in-person guidance, support, information that will help you to understand and navigate your taxes and your overall tax obligations. We do, as Nancy mentioned, provide educational sessions, seminars for self-employed and small businesses. If you've got a group of more than 5 people, we'll do a seminar that's geared specifically to sole proprietors, or one that's geared specifically to small corporations. So just get in touch with us and we'll try and help you out with that. All right, the basics of your business number and CRA program accounts. A business number is required if you incorporate or you need a CRA program account. Why would you need one? Well, if you're dealing with federal, provincial, or municipal governments, from a business perspective, and you want to interact with them, you want to bid on a job, you're going to need a CRA business number. And registering for those CRA program account numbers, or the CRA tax account number is another way to think of it, is it can be done in a number of ways. You can go on to Canada.ca and literally type in register a business, we actually have, it's called Business Registration Online. And that allows you to click a button, fill in all the fields, and you're able to generate your business number. If you get stuck in one or two questions, then you may want to phone us at 1-800-959-5525. That's the phone number that's going to be the one you keep in your pocket. That's the business inquiries line. They answer general questions as well as account specific questions. They have access to your accounts, whereas we as liaison officers don't go into the accounts because ours is an educational service. We get just that, here's the number to contact them at, they've got this kind of business, and that's about all we know. When you're phoning, you end up speaking with a general agent to start, and if you need more detailed explanations and that kind of thing, the person you're speaking with will, by answering questions, determine if you need to be passed on to a more senior person. Another way to register is that we still do accept paper registrations. The form is the RC1. It can be faxed in or mailed in. And again, that information is at the Canada.ca site, and you're looking at the CRA section of the site. Let's look at the business number. It starts with a 9-digit combination followed by a 2-character program identifier, and then followed by the 4-digit reference number. The most common program accounts are GST, HST, payroll deductions if you have any type of employees that you're paying. Corporation income tax, of course, is going to require a business account number, and there are import-export numbers, and those are the ones that fall under the CRA's umbrella. There are other areas that handle other types of accounts, but those are the ones that we basically administer. So every type of account, whether it's HST, payroll, corporate tax, has its own rules about whether or not you need to register, at what point, the type of information you have to keep, the rules that apply to different scenarios. So you want to get as much information as you can, depending on what that scenario you're dealing with is. So we all have to file taxes in Canada, as we have a self-assessing tax system. When you're an individual, you file the T1 income tax return, and the T1 income tax return uses your social insurance number as your tax account number. Okay, that T1 return is the return where you report your self-employment income as well. Now, if you choose to incorporate, you're creating a separate legal entity, and that corporation has to file its own tax return. So you, the individual, even though you're the shareholder, you're the person that created this separate legal entity, you're separate. Okay. The corporation has to have a tax account number. It's required to file a tax return every fiscal period. That fiscal period is its tax year. We as individuals, our tax year is the calendar year, January through to December, but a corporation has up to 371 days after it's created to establish that year end. Anyway, the corporation tax return, this is just a brief look at what it looks like. You can search it on the Canada.ca site. You can search T2, and that's what it will come up. You'll actually have a number of links come up. The T2 corporation return, you have the tax guide, you have the T7B, that is the installment guide with regards to corporations. Okay, so books and records. Basically, if you're going to opt a business, you really need to get a hold of good record keeping habits. There are information circulars that we've got listed at the bottom of this slide that will give you definitions, the rules, all sorts of useful information with regards to your books and records. Now, your books are basically the data that you compile to come up with your accounting, okay? And the records are everything that you use in order to get to those accounting documents. You have to keep all of your books and records for 6 years from the end of the latest year to which they relate. So you're required to keep those documents. Individuals have to keep the documents, but especially if you're a business engaged in any kind of commercial activity, or persons who are required to file an HST return or remit payroll deductions, you have to keep all records that pertain to those. Now, with regards to revenues, you're required to report all of your revenue from your business: products sold, services rendered, subsidies, rents, tips. Keep in mind that you report all of that no matter how the money is being paid to you, whether it's cash units or barter transactions. Maybe you were going to do a web page for somebody if they come and do your landscaping. That's still a business transaction. You've got to give that a monetary value and include it in your documentation. Okay.
Hi there. I just wanted
With
to
regards to
a repair request that I'd sent in.
oh, sorry. Okay.
Number is
Megan, I think
R
you're
for
on.
I think
Roger,
that
P as in Paul 49990.
Just let me mute Megan.
I had sent in a watch.
okay. All right. So with regards to expenses, I guess everybody always heard that you can deduct anything for your businesses. Well, for tax purposes, again, there are rules, and your expenses are deductible if they're incurred to earn business income, supported by invoices, paid or payable by the taxpayer or registrant, and reasonable in the circumstances. You're not allowed to include your personal portions, so don't forget to remove those. If you have both business and professional income, you're going to have to keep track of those separately, right? So and you ask, what do I mean by business or professional? Just a quick explanation to that. Professional income is considered to be the income generated by those who are in doctors, lawyers, accountants. They have some kind of governing body that they answer to. Otherwise, you're basically earning your business income. Okay. We will certainly answer more questions at the end if you have them. So again, the expenses are not everything. They have to be heard for that earning the business income. And the question with regards to the golf fees that came up earlier, I don't believe that they were ever allowed. They were probably claimed, but the overall annual dues are the things that can be considered personal in nature. The individual time that you would take a client out to, say, you're going to do 18 holes and dinner, and well, that individual expense may be allowable based on the criteria. And again, it has to be reasonable in the circumstances. All right, so when you're self-employed, you're a sole proprietor, you're reporting all of your revenue and expenses, as well as details about the business on your T21 Statement of Business or Professional Activities. This is basically a 6-page attachment to your personal tax return. So you'll see this has your social insurance number listed on there. If you have a business number, it's also expected that you put that in there. And we're asking for an industry code, which is helpful to the federal government. So you're identifying where you are located amongst all the industries in Canada. And the industry codes that we use is from the North American Industry Classification System. And that is used by Canada, the US, and Mexico. So we're trying to compare apples to apples. It's really important to get your industry code precise. If you change your business activity, you're going to want to change it on your T2125. If you're operating any kind of internet business activities, we're asking that you include the website addresses in your statement of business and professional activities. Also included in the statement of business professional activities are your detailed calculations about business use of home, motor vehicle deductions that you can take. Everything that you put into the T2125, your statement of business and professional activities, ends up going into your personal tax return as 2 line items, your gross business income and your net. Okay. So we're going to move on to GST HST.
Sorry, I just
GST HST. Yes, sorry, Jade.
yeah, no worries. I just wanted to
Sorry,
mention
can't hear you.
in terms of, oh, you can't hear me? Can you hear me?
Better.
Okay, perfect. I
Yes.
just wanted to mention very quickly to everybody in terms of the T2125, you do want to just keep in mind that if you are running 2 separate types of sole proprietor businesses or that kind of relate to different industries, say maybe you run a food business and a photographer business, you do want to ensure that you are filing different T2125 forms for each of those. And I just wanted to mention that it's the same kind of idea. If you were an employee and you were, employed by multiple different employers and you would file different T4 slips for each position, the same thing kind of goes for T2125. And I know some people, tend to overlook that or they aren't aware of that. And I just wanted to quickly mention that. Sorry, Andy. Thank you.
Thanks, Jade. No, that's okay. No problem. Okay, so one of the biggest areas of confusion regards to the GST HST is whether or not you have to register. And first of all, you need to know whether the service or goods that you're selling are considered to be taxable supplies, zero rated, or exempt. So most supplies in Canada are taxable. And if you're a registrant, you're going to be charging GST HST on those supplies. Okay. If you're if the person you're selling to is, say, outside of Canada, then you're not charging them GST HST at all, because GST HST tax that we have here in Canada. Zero rated supplies, those are things like your basic groceries, prescriptions, and as I mentioned, anything you're selling outside, so your exports. And they're considered to be zero rated because the GST HST is being charged at a rate of 0%. One of the benefits of registering, becoming a GST HST registrant, is that you are in a position where not only are you charging it to your customers, but you are also on your return claiming the GST HST that you have actually spent in order to operate your business. So those amounts which are GST HST and directly related to the operation of your business become what's called input tax credits, or ITCs, so that they get deducted from what you've charged your clients, and the balance is what you end up sending to the CRA. When it comes to exempt supplies, things like health, medical services, education services, childcare, those are the ones that you're not charging the GST HST on. You can't claim the input tax credits, and you actually shouldn't be a registrant if that's the only thing you're doing. Okay, so registration for GST HST is, it's voluntary until you reach the mandatory threshold of $30,000. So if you decide you want to get that GST HST number from the beginning of your business, by all means, call 1-800-959-5525 and say, I'd like to register for a GST HST number. Please, they'll ask you, do you already have a business number? Yes or no? If not, they'll assign you one right on the spot. You get your paperwork to follow. So if your sales reach that $30,000 mark in one single calendar quarter or over 4 consecutive calendar quarters, you're required to mandatorily register. The upcoming slides will touch on those scenarios. Taxable supplies are properties and services that are made in the course of any commercial activity that are subject to GST HST. So if you're a taxi or commercial ride sharing driver, you have to register regardless of the revenue level. That's a mandatory thing. Okay. Again, as I mentioned before, the input tax credits allow you to recoup the HST that you've spent in order to operate your commercial activities. This is what an HST return looks like. It's a simple one-page return. If you've been maintaining your books and records, keeping track of all of your invoices that you've issued to your customers and the expenses that you've come in, and you've separated out the costs and you've separated the taxes, this return becomes a very simple thing. The portion of it identifies the name of the business number, the period which you're reporting for, and the due date. And usually will come to you pre-populated. And if you're filing it electronically, it'll be in the My Business Accounts section of our website. The working copy, the things that you're really looking at tracking and summarizing here are the total sales, not including the tax, the total GST HST you've charged to your clients, and the total GST HST you've paid out and are going to claim as input tax credits. Difference again between what you've paid and what you've charged your clients is going to be the net tax, and you're either going to be remitting or sending that into CRA, or you're going to be requesting a refund from us. And that's the pure GST HST return. So the reporting periods that you can choose, if your sales are $1.5 million or less, you can choose annual, quarterly, or monthly reporting. The default when you call register would be an annual reporting, but it's your choice. If your sales are between 1.5 and 6 million, you are required to file quarterly, but your choice is monthly. And if your sales are more than 6 million, then no choice, you have to file those returns monthly. So examples with regards to the small supplier status. And you're a small supplier when you start your business and to that $30,000 mark, which is your mandatory registration. Small suppliers can voluntarily register at any time, but we're going to go through these examples very quickly. So if you exceed $30,000 limit in one particular quarter, this is how it's going to work. You'll see the first quarter you made $2,000 or you billed $2,000. Second quarter you billed $10,000. The third quarter you billed $38,000. In that example, the sale that exceeded the small supplier limit was made on September 23rd. Therefore, in the third quarter, you cease immediately to be a small supplier because you've exceeded the $30,000 limit in that one calendar quarter. So you have to start collecting the GST HST on the sale that made you exceed the 30,000 limit, even if you're not registered yet. I would recommend that you register right away, but you do have 29 days after you cease to be a small supplier to get that registration sorted out. Okay, so our second example, what happens if you exceed 1,000 in 2 consecutive quarters? So you've got the 30,000 limit by the end of the second consecutive calendar, but not in quarter 1. You'll be a small supplier for the following month. So you see how the first 2 quarters ended in June. You're still a small supplier for July, and you start collecting GST HST in August after you cease to be a small supplier. You have 29 days to register after you make your first sale other than as a small supplier. Example 3, what happens if you exceed the 30,000 limit in the 4 consecutive calendar quarters? In this case, you're exceeding the 30,000 limit in the last 4 consecutive quarters. You start collecting in May of 2019, even if you're not registered. And again, you have the 29 days to make sure that you get that registration. So CRA has a number of online services, and one of the big things that we are recommending is that as an individual, register for My Account. If you have business transactions, that you register for My Business Account. The thing that links the two is your social insurance number. Anytime you set up a business account with the federal government, with CRA in particular, your social insurance number is going to be linked. If you had a business number that had your social insurance number in it, and then you registered for My Account, you would literally be able to see your account information show up as well. So these are free services. Literally, you're going to track them and keep them secure the same as you would with a bank account. You're not giving out your passwords to anyone. If you have a party representative helping you, they should be registering for Rep ID and access that way, not through your personal information. So as far as these accounts, you're able to view information, all of your tax documents, source slips. You can get the proof of income statement that sometimes banks ask for. You can also manage, which means you're able to real time make changes, whether it's changing an address, filing a return, removing a representative or adding a representative. Okay. We also have a multimedia library. Again, canada.ca, you'll see the bottom of the slide, CRA-gallery. We have so many videos, webinars, podcasts. Literally, come up with a question. How does GST-HST work? There's a video for that. When do I need to register for payroll? There's a video for that. So the videos could be as short as a couple minutes, or they could go on for a half hour, 45 minutes. They also come with transcripts. So if you don't want to listen to or watch the video, you can read the content. And again, anything you're not sure of, you're confused about, we have our 800 lines to assist as well. But the nice thing about the multimedia library is so long as our website is up, you have access to this. You know, if you have a question on the weekend, you can still get it answered because these videos do answer a lot of those questions. Our COVID-19 relief measures, we have support for individuals under the Canada Recovery Benefit, Canada Recovery Sickness Benefit, Canada Caregiving Benefit, and the Emergency Response Benefit has ended. But I would suggest going to the canada.ca site. You can look at that main screen after you've chosen English or French, and then literally choose the pick COVID. You can search just COVID and it'll take you to the page. There's a page that literally breaks it down. Support for individuals, support for businesses, charities. There's a lot of good information on the site. Some of the relief measures for businesses include the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy, the new rent subsidy that is for direct commercial tenants, the 10% wage subsidy for employers, the emergency business account. If you need or want some personalized assistance, our one-on-one sessions are not time limited. We're not going to do the returns for you, but we'll certainly guide you through what you need to know in detail. We can take a look at what you've set up already for your books and records and make recommendations as to how you can strengthen that. We can answer tax-related questions. We're never going to give you advice per se, but we're going to guide you to the documents that tell you this is how it's supposed to be done. And we can provide those explanations to you as well. So if you are interested in having that one-on-one session, whether it's a phone call or you want to hang on until we get the web meetings going, then let us know. Put in your request because of course they are first come, first serve, and we try to get to everyone as soon as possible. And all you have to do is go to canada.ca, CRA-liaison-officer, and you'll be able to find us. Again, we have a whole lot of links and phone numbers that are available to assist. Do we have any questions? Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Cynthia.
Thanks so much, Indy. That was great. Thanks, Jade, for answering some of the questions during the presentation. I'm going to turn it over to Jade and Indy for the Q&A section with the audience. I do want to just reiterate that the slides will be sent to the participants. I also have a great PDF of just straight links and resources that looks very much like this slide, but even more. It's like 2 full pages of where to go, what forms, where to find what on the CRA website, what all the phone numbers are to get the information you need. So definitely listen to the Q&A. Don't worry about scribbling down links and phone numbers right now. You'll get it all via email. Okay, Jade and Indy, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, perfect.
All right, great. Thanks, Nancy.
Thanks, Nancy. Would you like me to stop sharing this screen?
It's up to you. I mean, I would advise maybe keeping the share up in case people have questions about specific slides.
Okay.
Perfect. Okay, and I just wanted to begin kind of tagging along to those last few slides there, and you know, Indy was talking about the personalized visits, which certainly, yes, we do definitely offer individual visits where you can just speak directly, kind of one-on-one with one of the liaison officer services. But to kind of expand on that, because we did have a question in the chat box from Tabitha Curley, and her question was, could we share this recording about the CRA information with entrepreneurs directly in class? And I did put it in the chat box there, but I did want to reiterate, in addition to our individual visits, we actually do offer online webinar services as well. So if your organization, or maybe you have a team, you know, of a few people who would be interested in learning this information as a group, we'd be more than happy to do a webinar with you. We do them on two different levels. We do them for both sole proprietors and self-employed individuals, as well as for small incorporated business owners. It is similar to this type of format, but it's much more in depth and in detail. We talk about, you know, all the different types of online services that we have. We go more into detail over revenue and expense concepts. In particular, business expenses. We know that's a huge one, and people often ask us, you know, what are the guidelines? What exactly can we and can we not claim? We talk about GST and HST, as well as payroll on a high level view. So certainly, I can't recommend it enough. If you guys are looking for a group type service, you can certainly request that as well through the liaison officer website. And like Nancy had mentioned, we have put together a condensed information sheet so that you'll get all of the hot links to that. The link for the liaison officer service is on there as well. So I just wanted to mention that before we get into the questions here. And I think we'll get it going. So the first one we have here, Indy, is from Megan Terboakshorst. I apologize. I know I'm probably butchering your name there. And the question is, what stage in our business, if we're self-employed and have no employees, should we look at incorporating? When does it make the most sense?
Okay. So CRA is not going to tell you when you have to incorporate. That is absolutely a personal decision. And ideally, I'm just looking at the pros and cons for yourself, for your type of business. You can have employees as a sole proprietor entity. You can set up a payroll account and have those employees working for you. Again, incorporating offers you a level of, one of the main reasons people want to incorporate their businesses is for the legal liability protection, right? And ultimately, that is up to you. When you go from a sole proprietor to an incorporated entity, you are looking at additional costs. So be wary of that. Take a look, ask around. If you're not very good at accounting and you definitely want an accountant to do your tax, that's your decision. We do have free tax software that's available through the CRA website for both individuals and businesses. I think that some of the corporation tax software might have caveats, like if it's a no net tax owing or a loss return, they'll allow you to use the software for free, or if it's a regular income situation where you owe taxes, then it's a fee of $100 or so to do a tax return with the software that's available through the CRA's website. Again, incorporating, it's a very personal decision. You want that separate legal entity. If you want to have an entity, a business that you can look at existing indefinitely, then maybe you're looking at incorporating. If you want multiple shareholders, if you want to do succession planning, those are the reasons that you're going to incorporate, because that is a separate legal entity. Whereas that sole proprietor, that's you, that's your personal business. And that's, even if it were a partnership, the partnership requires that unless it's an incorporated partnership, you're going to be reporting that income and that business activity of the partnership, your share, again, on your personal tax return. So we can go into detail. We have corporation presentations for individuals. If you wanted to have a liaison officer educational session, we can go through the material with you and show you a little more detail on that. So unfortunately, I can't say when that point is. That's up to you. Yeah,
it's definitely a discussion to maybe have with some type of advisor or accountant based on your scenario. Yeah. Okay, perfect. Moving on to the next question.
Yeah.
If registered and incorporated business, I assume if I registered and incorporated my business in 2020, but won't start making revenue until 2021, will I have to file business taxes for 2020? Or we, I guess, for the corporation?
Yes. And as I mentioned in the beginning, we all have to file our returns. This business, let's say it started in March of 2020. You've got 371 days within which to establish when your year end is going to be. And truly, the way that you establish when that year end is by filing that corporate tax return. So you may have begun the business on March 1st. On your first T2 corporate tax return, that will be the start date of the business. And that date, within 371 days of that you choose, will be the end of the year. So let's say you decide you want your year end to be November 30th. So that first return that you file will be effective from the 1st of March when you incorporated to November 30th that you want your year end to be. And your second return that you have to file, and even if there's no business activity, filing what's called a nil return, there's something called a T2 short. It's a shorter version of the T2 return, and it's meant for when you have nil taxes or a loss showing. So you can do a truncated return, and that's absolutely fine, but you are required to file. So back example, March 1st to November 30th, that's your first return. Your next return will begin from December 1st and will go to November 30th. So you've established November 30th as your year end, and you're going to be filing a return for that corporation every year. You have 6 months in order to get the return filed to us. But depending on your corporate situation, you have between 2 and 3 months to pay the taxes owing that you've calculated. And again, that's why it's so important to be on top of your books and records so that you know, you have an idea of what kind of situation you're going to be in as far as taxes owing. With your corporate tax return, you're also going to be required to send in a balance sheet, income statement, Schedule 50, which speaks to who the shareholders are and what their personal information is. Okay.
All right. And the corporation may not have revenues, Indy, but they may have business. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I can hear you now. Yes.
Okay, I'll hold it up. No, but I was just quickly mentioning too, I mean, the corporation may not have revenues in the business for that year, but they may have expenses, business expenses, right? Or if they start acquiring assets, they may have other expenses that they can claim. Correct, Indy?
Yes, correct. And that's what would put you technically in a loss position in that first year, first couple of years, is where you have little or no actual billing, but you are starting to acquire things in order to run that business. monthly fees, the rent, the whatever it is that you'll be doing.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Moving on to the next question. Do you recommend sending founders to services like this? I did quickly look at the link. It was from an anonymous attendee for owner.co. It looks like the website kind of provides the stepping stones for starting a business and things like that. Unfortunately, as you know, the CRA, we do remain quite unbiased. And again, like Indy had said, we don't necessarily tell you how you have to do your bookkeeping or your accounting or things like that. Certainly our website has a list of pre-approved accounting softwares and programs that you can use. As well, in that information sheet that we did curate for you guys, there's actually going to be a link on there that is from the canada.ca website, and it talks about all your different obligations and requirements from a federal tax standpoint for starting your business. So that can certainly be a good place for you guys to start. But in terms of other services that are available, I think we kind of remain silent on that. Okay. Moving on, a question from Carrie Drennan. I have recently incorporated. I have a HST number for my sole proprietorship. I assume I need to apply for a new GST number. Indy, would you like to take it? I can take it.
Okay, sure. That's fine. I can take that one too. With regards to your sole proprietor number, if you are still going to be operating some type of sole proprietor business, you would keep your GST HST number. If not, and all of your business activity is transferred into your corporation, then you are expected to close your sole proprietor account number and file your final return. So it'll be whatever period, let's say we'll use that same November 30th was your year end, but you had some sole proprietor activity that you continued until June and it kind of overlapped. Well, you'd be asking the CRA to close your HE account effective June 30th, and you'd be filing a return for the period ending June 30th for your HST account. Now, a sole proprietor HST account gets closed, but if you ever start up another sole proprietor business activity, you are going to be reopening that. So you'll have the same number, but it'll restart. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you recall the slide that we were looking at that showed the business number. Your corporation is going to be given a business number. Let's say it's 123456789. The corporate tax account number, that number which identifies that business entity, is be 123456789 RC0001. When you ask for an HST number, it will begin with the same corporate business number, 123456789, and then it'll end in RT, and then very likely 0001. So that identifies that HST account as being the HST account number of that corporate entity. Does that answer the question? I think we're pretty good on that one.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Perfect. And on to, sorry. And then, so the next question is from Amy Lazar-Kleiman. Just a quick comment. She said, thank you, Indy and the CanWCC for these amazing seminars. Her question, I registered for an HST number earlier this year. CRA's help was so appreciated when I hit the 30K threshold and was so confused. I have my business number, but I have not incorporated. How do I know when I need to do that? Thank you.
Again, incorporating is not mandatory. It's a choice. If you feel that it's time, then you're probably going to want to talk to a lawyer, an accountant, just to get some more information with regards to what's going on in your business, where you're expecting it to go, and how to get there. we're not going to tell you that you have to incorporate right now or at any time.
Mhm.
I've had meetings with individuals who had $6, $7, $8 million in revenue and 40 or 50 employees, and they weren't incorporated. And I've asked, so what made you decide to stay a sole proprietor? And at that time, the person said, this works. I said, okay. I was just curious, so, I mean, it really depends on you. If you want to incorporate, yes, there are some different tax advantages for corporations, but it is your choice.
Right. It's a lot more to keep on top of, and many more obligations as well.
Yeah,
Great. Okay, so from Linda Q. Okay, sorry, and I'm just referring to her comment below. When I bought commercial property, there's an empty land at back. I sold this lot this year because I need money to change the property roof. Just wondering about HST.
Roof. Okay.
Yeah, I did not pay HST when I bought the business, so I did not collect HST from the buyer. When I do my tax return at the end of the year, how can I do this? How can I do with this money by selling the lot? This seems like a very, very specific.
Okay, so
Indy, if you want to tackle it, or otherwise, Linda, definitely it may be good to book an individual phone call or visit with the liaison officer service. But Indy, go for it.
There are a lot more questions that we would need to ask in order to give a good answer on this. I would almost recommend a conversation with our GST HST rulings department. Their name is GST HST rulings, but they can answer questions with regards to transactions that have to do with property and whether or not HST should or shouldn't be charged. And if you have that HST account number, where does it go on the return? Is there a special place for it? So we don't really have enough information to answer the question at this point. If you do want the rulings number, that is 1-800-959-8287. That's GST HST rulings. And they really, their job is to handle those complicated questions, and they respond in writing to written requests. But if you have a question where you just need a little bit of guidance, they should be able to refer you to some documentation about sale of commercial property and how the taxes apply to it.
Thanks. A question from Marianne Bell. Why is it important to be precise on the industry code? For those of you who don't know, that was the code that was inputted on the T2125. It's called the North American Industry Classification Systems Code. So she's asking, what is it used for?
You want that one, Jade, or would you like me to?
You can go for it.
Okay, so the coding is used by areas of the government like Industry Canada, for example, to provide information on trends. And when you file your T2125, or if you file a T2 return, all of the tax returns that have to do with the businesses are asking for your industry code. And your information gets transferred, not personal information, but the data, the expense totals, the revenue totals, that gets transferred to other areas of the government agencies. And they use that to provide things like there's a benchmarking goal that we show you when we have our one-on-one meetings. And it helps you understand what other people in your industry are doing. How much are they spending on advertising or salaries, and if they're a marketing firm, or and you can't really tell if it's a 1-person shop or a 20-person shop, but it gives you percentages that you can use to compare. I mean, even if you're looking to move into another business, you have information about what different industries are doing and what kind of costs they're incurring. It's expected to be correct because that helps in producing that information and making it available to the public. Again, your personal info, it'll never be something that can be directly linked to you because it's just the data that's shared. And ideally, if there are government programs that are being offered to a specific industry, they can get that information sent out to those industries. If they've got incorrect industry classifications and, maybe the numbers are misrepresented because somebody decided to say they're a consultant, not a marketing person, they may miss out on the information that's going out to marketing companies or geared to the marketing associations. Right. So it's more to be able to provide information when the time comes to the public, but also to have information available for the public to use.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know if you did mention it earlier, Indy, but there is no consequence if you incorrectly file the wrong NAICS code in your T2125. So just be aware of that. But yes, we will. I think the benchmarking or the link to the benchmarking tool has also been included in that info sheet. So you can go on there and use your NAICS code to create certain data reports about your industry. And like Indy had said, it is nice if you are even looking at maybe moving into a different industry, or even if you're a sole proprietor currently and you're maybe looking to incorporate, and you can see, what the numbers look like from that perspective as well. So it is nice to have the correct number and you kind of gain access to all those additional tools.
So I just want to sort of check in here. We are coming up to almost the end of our session. I wanted to ask one final question. So these sessions are designed for service providers, advisors, coaches, etc., that work for organizations that support entrepreneurs. And so I want to ask you, Jade and Indy, what would you say to service providers? What should they do? What should they recommend to an entrepreneur or business owner that comes to them saying, I just got a notice in the mail or online from the CRA, and it says that I'm being audited, or they want more information about my last tax return, or and I'm freaking out. What should a service provider say to them to talk them off the ledge, basically? Any advice?
Okay. I would say don't freak out. Do not freak out. It's not the end of the world.
Right.
If it's a letter asking for additional information, submit it. Keep copies. Always keep copies. We have services now where you can submit documents online. So if you're getting a letter, they're going to have a reference number. You can literally scan it in. It goes directly to that area, and the person who requested the information picks it up. Talk to them. They ask you to call. They ask you to send documentation in. Absolutely send it. If you want to send in further explanations as to how you came up with your calculations, communicate. It's really important because that will help them understand. I mean, it may be that everybody who claimed this particular thing is getting that same letter. And again, because our system is a self-assessing system, in essence, your return gets filed, it gets processed, it gets accepted. You're required to keep all of your documentation to prove how you came up with that tax return that you submitted. That's a legal document, right? So yes, contact us, respond, send in whatever it is they're looking for, ask questions if you have them. The interaction should be a cooperative one. So don't panic. No, don't panic. Breathe, relax, get them the info that they're looking for. That's my, I mean, I got a notice about childcare expenses a couple of years ago, and it was a couple of years after the fact. I'm like, oh, okay, fine. Went and pulled out the tax return, sent it in, and I never heard anything after it.
Yeah.
So,
And
you
really,
know,
I mean,
it's not supposed to be a scary thing.
Yeah, all they're trying to do is really just verify the information and the numbers that have been claimed. And so that's what it really kind of comes down to, as you mentioned, Indy. It's all within the bookkeeping and the record keeping, making sure that you're organized and you have all of the documentation there. If you have certain expenses that are, if you're a sole proprietor, if they're both business and personal in nature, making sure that you're keeping documents or notes as to how you came up with the amounts that you've included in your business expenses. So, as long as you kind of keep yourself organized as you go, then when they do ask for this information, you have it readily available. And then hopefully it will be less stressful, I guess, of a process for you. So. It really all comes down to that, I feel like, as well.
That's great. I appreciate that. I definitely feel like there is an exaggerated fear of any communication coming from the CRA, and I would, I think that there should be less of that. People need to be okay with the fact that
Yes, absolutely.
the CRA is an agency that is staffed by people, and we're all just trying to get along here.
We're people too, right? So.
Exactly. Yeah. And
that's right.
Sometimes the CRA makes a mistake too, because it's people. So
absolutely. Yep.
So
yeah. And
don't be afraid to, it's an interaction that we want to have.
Yeah. And the CRA, the folks that I've dealt with at the CRA, present company excluded, have always been very, very willing to help and try to try to help out small business owners whenever possible. So I think people are hesitant to reach out and contact them. It's almost like, oh, now I'm on the radar. I really want to promote that communication that you talked about. So that's fantastic.
Yeah, and Nancy, that's exactly why we exist. We're here to provide that outreach and that help to you guys. And it's I don't know if we did mention it, but the meetings they're 100% confidential. We don't share the information with other departments in the CRA. We're just here to help get you on track, or if you're already doing things right, we kind of give you a thumbs up, right? So we do exist as well to help you guys learn more about what your tax obligations are. So
that's great. Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for spending this time with us today and answering the questions. I really appreciate it. I also want to thank Wendy as well as Shannon from WEKH. And I would like to thank Tasha from my team from CanWCC. She's been helping out on the chat and Q&A, doing some background moderating on CanWCC's behalf. I hope that all of the participants learned something today and enjoyed their time with us. I know that time is precious, so I really, really appreciate you taking the time to register and sign up. I would really encourage everyone to attend all 4 of the sessions, and we'll be covering some additional concepts. And as I said, we will wrap up with a panel discussion where we apply an intersectional gender lens to these concepts that we're covering. Thank you so much and have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Okay.